welcome to another edition of Radical Grace Radio.
I'm Pastor Gary Held.
My name is Matthew Pancake, and this is episode 818. And, you know, here's the thing I got to tell you, Pastor. It's hard getting people to pay attention to the gospel, but YouTube turns out to be a little bit helpful on that because we recently started doing a video version. Those of you that are listening, go look for it.
True.
And the thing is we're on YouTube, and I was looking at some of the analytics earlier, and we actually had a video breakthrough into recommendations. And when it goes into recommendations, it's putting it in people's recommended feeds.
Right.
And it turns out people were watching it. So, that's interesting. Now, it does two things. One of them is it makes you realize that, okay, that was a good idea. Have the show on YouTube as well. But the other thing is it means that, we got to do this episode needs to be a good follow-up.
Yeah, well,
because people have had a chance to look. So here we are doing a show. Okay, so what do we do? We're a program where we look at everything through a gospel lens. The idea is to make people realize that you could think with the mind of Christ. And, you know, I've actually missed talking about that the last couple of weeks because that is the thing that I picked up from doing a sojourn through Lutheranism, thinking with the mind of Christ. I don't think that I would ever have come across that otherwise, you know, unless I had contact with Luther's small catechism and so forth.
Right, right.
Yeah. So that's a thing.
One thing I think about is that we, we've been told at different times, listener feedback, that this show is different than other perhaps Lutheran shows that are on the radio or on social media, however you're getting the show, and the thing that one listener said that they thought we had a more, I don't think this is quite right, but more of a little bit more of a devotional slant than, say, a pure doctrinal. And I think I'm not sure that that's the right way to characterize it. I agree that there's something going on with our presentation that isn't just about, hey, let's find some good, solid doctrine and keep pounding it. I think I'd like to think that there's something kind of pastoral about the way we're approaching not only the teaching, but also how we look at the different things that are coming up in, whether it's the news roll or things going on in the country.
Mm-hmm.
We try to use a Lutheran perspective on how do you say something that will be a blessing to people, that will help them, that will give them, comfort if they need comfort, or shake them up if they need a little shaking up. But that's not devotional. That's pastoral more than anything.
Right.
So,
and that's the thing is like whenever I say thinking with the mind of Christ, I didn't come to that just by studying doctrine. I came to it by a kind of practice, and then there's a way in which doing the show is part of the practice, but. Participating and listening, like, how do you hear with the ears that Jesus believes that we can hear with, right?
Right.
It's not just, okay, they're human ears and there's sound waves hitting an eardrum. There's something more going on there than just that. And that's what I've come to believe over the years. And that's what I like to think we do on this show. Right.
Well, your brain is wired in a certain way, and from birth, largely from birth. I mean, obviously you grow, you develop, but you know what? Here's the deal: is that the old man, the old Adam, the one that is the part of us that is really at home in this fallen world, it has caused our brains to be wired one way. If you're going to think new kinds of thoughts, specifically the kinds of ways that Jesus thought, you're going to need the Holy Spirit to begin rewiring your brain. Mm-hmm. You just have to unlearn some things. And when you unlearn some things, that means some synaptic connections die. And then, you got to form new ones. And I'm not saying I'm a brain scientist. I am saying that there's something more literal to thinking with this mind of Christ than perhaps people are giving us credit for. But
Right.
that phrase comes straight out of Paul's letters. So
Yeah.
if
You're
you
not
don't
making
like
that.
it, argue with St. Paul.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that I want to give people the opportunity to go, okay, I guess I will go argue with him. Because there are some people these days that are doing that. So, but we'll talk some about that on the other side of the break. That was a thing that we were talking about. This is May the 4th. So it's May the
Oh,
4th be with you, right?
yeah.
And well, that's
Nice
because of Star
reference.
Wars fans, but you and I kind of admitted off the air, and I don't know if we should be admitting this, but we're
Shh,
both kind
we
of,
don't speak about this.
we don't talk about
No, we
this.
can't. We can.
There's a way in which both of us are apostate Star Wars fans. I mean,
Yeah,
not really Star Wars fans anymore.
well, it's because the
No,
whole franchise has changed. How could it not change over basically my entire adult lifetime?
but
I
it
mean,
didn't
I
change for
was
the good.
I was there in the theater when it was released, and we watched Star Wars, and then the scrolling text, that was a new thing, and then you sit down low in your theater seating, and that was also something that got invented for presenting the movie was this THX sound system.
Hmm.
That was new. And my goodness gracious, you swore there was
Right.
an Imperial cruiser going right over your head. I
Yeah.
mean, it was so cool. But things
But we,
change
but
over time. They sure
yeah, but
do.
we've kind of both fallen from the faith. So
Yeah. Well, we can talk
yeah, I
about
know.
that later.
Yeah, we'll talk. We actually are going to talk about the idea of falling from the faith later. But the thing that we got to do now is the Christian news roll. So let's just hit the news roll button. A recent survey conducted by the Pew Research Center in spring of 2022 reveals around 2/3 of Americans believe it is possible to be moral and have good values without believing in God. This indicates a significant shift in beliefs, as only about 1/3 of Americans now consider belief in God as an essential component of morality. Responses to the survey varied depending on how important religion was in respondents' lives. That's a given. About 9 out of 10 Americans who didn't consider religion important believed that it was possible to be moral without believing in God. However, only 1/2 of those who considered religion to be very or somewhat important agreed with this statement. The survey also showed Democrats and those who lean Democratic are more likely to believe that belief in God is not necessary to be moral compared to Republicans and Republican leaners, or even people in the middle. Additionally, younger Americans and those with at least a college degree are more likely to share this belief. Interestingly, now this is kind of long, I know, but the survey found that 16 other Western countries also have, like, 2/3 of adults believe that people can be moral without believing in God. So maybe it's a Western problem, which is a little bit higher, the number is anyway, than the share of Americans who believe the same. In Europe and North America, at least 6 out of 10 respondents overall believe that it is not necessary to believe in God to be moral. Israelis, this is like a little curveball thrown in here. Israelis, however, were nearly evenly split over whether belief in God is necessary to be moral, with 47% saying such a belief is necessary, while 50% say that it isn't. Yep, we'll just stop right there for now. Maybe I've got way too much information about that. Some of these things interested me a lot this morning while I was putting this together. So,
Okay. Well, let's talk about the opposite of morality
yeah,
just for a second. The
or
number
maybe,
four
or maybe
story.
the result of this problem of,
Yeah, the number four story
yeah.
is that Pornhub, the world's largest pornography website, has blocked people in Utah from accessing its platform in protest of a new state law requiring visitors to verify their ages before entering the site. Now, the law was signed into effect by Utah Governor Spencer Cox in late March, and the law took effect on May 2nd. Visitors in Utah are met with a message stating complete disablement of access to the website and a video from pornographic actor Cherie DeVille, who argues the law puts children and privacy at risk. Interesting, children and privacy, but okay. Some social media users have celebrated Pornhub's move. In 2016, Utah declared pornography consumption a public health crisis. And recent data compiled by Pornhub in 2014 found that Utah ranks number 40 in page views per capita compared to other states and in the U.S. And we don't have any more recent word on how they rank now. But anyone who wants to look at Pornhub is going to find a way, because that's what you've heard these VPNs. That's what VPNs claim they are able to do. And no, we're not sponsored by Surfshark or ExpressVPN or Pornhub or any of the other things. We're not sponsored. We're not telling you go look for anything. Don't look for anything
except us.
Yeah,
look for us.
Surf into our site.
Right.
That's what we want you
That's
to do.
what you do. RadicalGraceRadio.com. Okay, so the number 3 story. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's latest information, in 2021, 25% of high school students in the United States identify as homosexual. This is in 2021, by the way. Who knows what it is right now? And they identify as homosexual, bisexual, or questioning their sexuality. Of the remaining participants, 75.2% claim to be exclusively attracted to the opposite sex in 2021. The CDC survey also found that the percentage of students with a sexual identity other than heterosexual has increased steadily over the years. Yeah, we knew that, actually. The Gallup survey showed that the share of American population identifying as LGBT has doubled over the past decade. That would be along with social media, with nearly 1 in 5 members of Gen Z identifying as LGBT. The share of Americans who identify as LGBT reached a record high of 7.2% in 2022, with a noticeably higher share at Gen Z respondents, 13.1%, reporting having, I like this, an other queer identity and categorizing themselves as transgender or non-binary. You know, that actually does rise right alongside social media. You know, the coming of the phone, you know, in around 2010, and social media apps and things like that.
So then you got to ask,
right along with it.
Is that causation or correlation? Yeah. Anyway,
I'm going to leave that to people that, you know things that I don't.
Okay. The number 2 story. Haven't heard about these folks in a while, but the Satanic Temple has now hosted its 2nd annual convention, Satancon. You know, you've heard of Comic Con? Well, this is Satancon in Boston's Copley Square over the weekend. I almost said cosplay because I was thinking about so many. Can you imagine all these people showing up in Satan costume?
Some did.
They did. So it does turn into a cosplay. Okay. Well, in Boston's Copley Square over the weekend. And boy, it was the talk of the town. Over 800 registered folks attended the event, making it the largest gathering of Satanists in the country. And I dare say in any country, but okay. They appeared to have, now, whether this is intentional or sad or whatever, they appeared to have overshot their 666 attendance by a large margin. But, you know, that's a different issue. Anyway, conservative and Christian groups from across the country were not pleased by this, and many of them traveled to Boston to protest against this event. They carried signs with Bible verses, prayed loudly, and generally made as much fuss as they could. Dex Desjardins, an ordained minister of Satan, whatever that means, and spokesman for the Satanic Temple, said the church is often, quote, misunderstood. He said, the thing is, we're not theistic. We don't have beliefs in a literal theistic Satan. And then he went on to say that, quote, the idea that we're just a free speech political activist group is wrong. We're not just that. If we do any sort of activism, it's in a very narrow band, basically aimed at protecting our equal rights under the First Amendment to religious liberty and to have equitable representation in the public square. Well, the Marriott in Copley Square was one of the only hotels in that area willing to work with the Satanic Temple due to fear of negative reviews, bomb threats, and physical attacks. The Satanic Temple receives death threats daily and even experienced an arson attack at its Salem headquarters last year. So,
Okay.
so it does sort of beg the question, though, doesn't it? If you don't believe in a God, or you don't believe in Satan either, okay, then how do you claim to be a religion protected by the First Amendment?
I don't know. I
You're a
don't know.
godless religion.
I don't know.
What are you? I don't know
Uh,
what.
I don't
Hmm.
know. But it's misunderstood.
Well, yes, you're so
So,
terribly misunderstood. That's
right.
right.
It's misunderstood. Okay, so now I want to make sure that like this last one, this number one story is not misunderstood. Professional female cyclists are increasingly having to face against male. Now, this actually surprised me because we've had a few people like they'll mention a name and there's one person at a swim meet or something that's a transgender, this is actually kind of interesting. Okay, so I'll start again. Professional female cyclists are increasingly having to face against male-born athletes who identify as women, prompting concerns about the future of the women's sport. Hannah Ahrensman, a top professional cyclist, retired at 24 after coming fourth at the 2022 National Championship Cyclocross, in which Austin Killips, a transgender cyclist, came third. In an interview with the Washington Times, Ahrensman expressed her frustration with the current state of women's sports, and she stated this: "It's been very disheartening to finish this way. If this does not change, if the rules are not changed to make women's sports for women, there's not going to be women's sports in the next generation. The records are all going to male riders. We have more, listen to this, we have more than 50 transgender women in the sport. And what's going on in the background is that women are just walking away. They think, why bother if it's not fair?" Okay.
Right.
So yeah, the Independent Council on Women's Sports, or ICONS, cited a tally of 50 transgender cyclists on at iHeart Bikes that are either currently or recently active in women's elite international racing, fueling pushback as they capture titles, prize money, and podium slots in the women's circuit. Inga Thompson said, well, actually, she's the one I was quoting up there. I've got it all mixed up. I don't know how I managed to do that. So that is, I'm going to stop there and we'll talk more about it.
I'll tell you what this is going to have to. Tell you what this is going to have to. Well, okay. Pros and cons.
Right.
I know what's going to have to happen to get this moved from the back burner right up to the front burner as people watch the dang thing boil over. Is that because I don't think women's cycling. I'm not even sure women's swimming. Yes, they have followings. I'm not saying they're not important, but here's what's going to get. This is what's going to happen: is at some point you're going to have a transgender woman who is competing, in the sort of at the master's level in the LGPA. And boy, let me tell you what, the people who follow ladies professional golf, like they're just about as serious. Well, they are as serious as people who watch, the pro golf tour, the men. Yeah. So but a man, like, let's just say that you tee up the ball at the ladies' tees. Well, a person who was born with a Y chromosome, man, if they're good, and I'm not like me, but if they are good, maybe not great, but good, they can whack that ball farther than right. So I mean,
right. Every time I see these podium where they're giving people the prize money or they're giving people the awards, you see these women standing there and there's this guy just towering over them in every case. And I wanted to read one little bit from a brief that was filed with the U.S. Supreme Court by Hannah Ahrensman. She was the one that retired at 24.
Sure.
Just this little bit. It said, "At my last race, which was a recent UCI Cyclocross National Championship in the elite women's category in December of 22, I came in fourth place, flanked on either side by male riders awarded third and fifth place. My sister and family sobbed as they watched a man finish in front of me having witnessed several physical interactions with him throughout the race. See, and then I got to thinking, because I don't watch cycling all that often. And I
True.
thought, yeah, once in a while they kind of bump each other, and they do it intentionally, try and slow someone down. And I was thinking, oh, here's this big guy, elbowing his way through all these women, right? And it's like, yeah, okay, what was this stuff about? It's fair. It's perfectly fair, you know?
It's
And
not, but it's not going to get noticed. It's not going to get screamed about
yeah,
until it's something like ladies professional golf, or here's another one, Wimbledon. I'll bet you somebody isn't going to let that go down that way at Wimbledon.
yeah,
But then they're going to have to take a stand, and then they're going to have to give their reasons. And when they give their reasons, other people are going to say, that's the exact same thing I was talking about in our professional sport.
right.
So,
See, here's another quote.
it's bound, it's bound to come to an end at some point. It can't go on of its own.
Yeah,
It's of
see,
its own weight. It's going to crush.
yeah, here's
So,
one of the things. So Jonathan Bearden, he was also a trans athlete in women's
okay.
cycling. So he told the Denver Post in 2017, because they got this idea that like they're gonna like push their testosterone down and whatever else, right? They're gonna make adjustments to the man. So he said that his performance had ebbed since beginning hormone replacement therapy, and that his times were now in the gutter. And in this article that I read, said in this statement, Beardman betrayed the fact that he, like so many of his fellow self-centered male athletes who are destroying women's sports, believes that a woman is just a weaker man. Women aren't their own unique sex class with their own unique bodies, genetically coded and developed in distinct ways from male bodies. No, simply handicap a man with hormones and surgery, and you've got a woman. That's what the ideology is pushing. This idea that you can just make the adjustments.
You take. I'm not a doctor, obviously, but I believe this is true. Is that in the same volume of blood drawn from a man versus blood drawn from a woman, the man's blood, I believe, is always going to have, or at least typically has, more red blood cells. That's what carries the oxygen.
Yeah.
That's what allows them.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because there's a new thing that they're saying, at least in cycling. They call it gender doping.
Oh. I see why.
Yeah, because of exactly what you're talking about.
So, but the listener might not know what that's about. So,
well, you were talking about the red blood cells, so go ahead.
Well, so there's an idea. I believe this is what you're talking about. Is that sometimes a cyclist, if they find out that they did this, there's obviously the regulatory people, they call foul, but they will train extensively, say at an elevation, so that their blood gets to a point where, or maybe it's the other way, but whichever way, they want their blood to have sort of a super capacity for carrying oxygen. And then they draw some of their own blood and store it for just before the competition, then put that blood back into themselves. And of course, it was their blood to begin with, so there's no problem. But they have, they've doped their own blood system
to have red blood cells that can have more oxygen, right?
A super capacity to carry oxygen. That's right.
Right. So they call it gender doping because of exactly that. Because they said, what do you do about, there's more red blood cells in a male's body than there is a woman's.
Yeah.
And the thing is they'll always come down to, well, we'll draw blood samples and we'll do this and this. And it's like, right. We're right back to this idea of like, if you handicap a man enough, somehow it'll be fair. No. I mean, you're just not going to get me to believe that that's right. I don't buy it. And I don't, and the article that they were talking about here, this article is in what's called Distance Magazine. It's what happened to women's cycling, how the sport was colonized by mediocre narcissistic men.
Yeah.
Because they've had to deal with them face to face, and it's apparently how they are. You pin this more than 2 years ago when you said that, here's the guy who was no good at it at all whenever he's facing, males.
Middle of the
So,
road,
yeah.
tops.
And then he moves over to, he says, well, I'm trans, and then moves over there, and now he's, setting records.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just don't understand that. I guess it's because I'm not narcissistic. I mean, if I was narcissistic, I'd be like making the whole world watch my show somehow. But there's always some little thing that says, hey, back it off a little bit, But some of these things make me hot because it's just like, what are you doing? I don't understand why you would want to destroy what women have managed to do, and then just take it away from them. It seems like it's the worst kind of misogyny. It's like, well, I'm a woman. You should let me do it. But it just goes to prove that human beings, they'll do almost anything for like social status.
There's that, and there's the folks that, they're going to talk a good game about how they're committed to the sport, and the training for the sport and all the things. But certainly seems as if their first concern was for the sport, they would have a different attitude. I think what it really is their first concern is for the ideology, and the sport is second or third after,
right,
several other things.
Well, they want to do something that makes them seem, how is it that they put it? Makes them seem stunning and brave because I am, as a trans person, I'm not that I am. Don't anybody confuse that. But I can hear him saying, because they have said, I'm the first trans person in whatever, and it's stunning and brave because I'm pioneering a new frontier. And that's what everybody wants. They want to be the first something, or whether they want to be, it's like, really? So that's not narcissistic, want to be the first, the first with 15 asterisks after my name, yeah, sure. Whatever. Anyway, this seems like at this point whiplash, but we're going to do it anyway. What are we going to talk about on the other side of the break?
It is whiplash.
It is whiplash after this.
So we're gonna deal with one of a question that got submitted to me. That it's kind of a listener question, or at least it was asked on behalf of a listener, and so. But people may be wondering about it. It shows the distinction between how maybe a Lutheran approaches sort of a complicated subject versus how somebody from a Reformed background would. Because what we want to talk about is whether and how Lutherans can teach that it's possible to lose your faith. You have your Christian faith. Well, what if you lose that faith? Is that even possible? So we're going to talk about that on the back half hour. Okay, so stick with us and we'll be right back with more Radical Grace Radio in just a moment.